Las Vegas has seen some kings over the years, and it's also seen some fools, but it's never seen both in the same person. In 1992, Archie Karas, a broke gambler, drove into the city with just $50 with him. He had no safety net, was without any backup plans, and zero intention of playing small. And this is where the story of Las Vegas' famous craziest gambling run begins. Born in Greece as Anarioros Karavoniotis, Archie Karas grew up poor and left home as a teenager before eventually making his way to the United States. In Los Angeles, he worked as a waiter for a while, which lasted right up until he realized he could make far more money playing pool for cash. Soon, Karas became a pool hustler, challenging strangers in smoky pool bars and quietly taking their money. From there, the stakes kept getting higher. The game of pool turned into poker, and then poker turned into various other high-stakes gambling, and for years, it actually worked. At one point, Karas had built himself a bankroll of millions of dollars sitting at poker tables with professional players and wealthy gamblers who thought they could beat him. And eventually, the math caught up. By the early 1990s, after a brutal stretch of losses, the fortune he had built up had completely vanished. Archie Karas had already lost everything. Years of gambling, hustling, and high-stakes play had finally caught up to him. The bankroll was gone, the winning streaks were gone, the safety net, if there ever was one, was gone too. What remained was $50 and a decision, a very interesting one. Now, for most people, that moment would signal something fairly obvious. Stop gambling, find a job, and rethink your life choices. But Archie Karas had never really been most people. So he got into his car and drove straight to Las Vegas. This was because, in his mind, being broke wasn't exactly a warning sign. If anything, it just meant the game had reset. And if there was anywhere on Earth where someone with $50 and a lifetime of questionable financial decisions could attempt a comeback, it was Vegas. In Las Vegas, Archie Karas did what gamblers tend to do when they run out of money. He borrowed some. In this case, some meant $10,000. Not exactly a carefully structured investment. Not a business strategy, just enough fuel to sit back at a table and try again. A fellow gambler, someone who knew Karas's reputation, loaned him the money. Because despite being completely broke, Karas still had one valuable asset left. People knew he could play. So he walked into a poker room and bought into a game of Raz. Now, Raz isn't the glamorous poker one sees on TV. It's a strange version of 7-card stud where the lowest hand wins, and it requires patience, memory, and an ability to read the table. Luckily for Karas, those were the skills he happened to have and had been polishing over the years. Within a short time, that borrowed $10,000 had quietly turned into $30,000, and the loan was repaid just like that. Suddenly, the man who had arrived in Las Vegas with $50 had a bankroll again. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something far more important to a professional gambler: momentum. For most players, that would have been a lucky night. For Karas, it was the first spark of something that would soon spiral into one of the most unbelievable gambling streaks the casino world had ever seen. From this point on, the numbers would stop making sense. With a small bankroll rebuilt, Archie Karas did what he had always done best. He started looking for more gambling tables, each carrying bigger consequences than the last. Soon, Karas found a wealthy gambler whose real name remained unknown and was publicly mentioned only as Mr. X. They decided to play pool at a bar near Liberes Plaza on East Tropicana in Las Vegas. At first, the stakes were reasonable, $5,000 a game, then $10,000, then $20,000. And before long, the two men were casually playing for $40,000 per game. The kind of numbers that turn a friendly match into a financial disaster for someone. In this case, that someone was Mr. X. Game after game, Karas kept winning. By the time the pool matches were over, Karas had taken roughly $1.2 million. Again, for most people, that would be the moment to stop. cash out, and disappear quietly. But Karas had a different idea. He and Mr. X moved the action to Binion's Horseshoe Casino and switched to poker, and the results didn't improve for Mr. X. Hand after hand, the chips kept sliding across the table. By the end of it, Karas had won another $3 million. So in the span of a relatively short time, the man who had arrived in Las Vegas had borrowed money and turned $10,000 into roughly $4 million. That would already qualify as the story of a lifetime, but for Archie Karas, it was just a warm-up. Now armed with millions, Archie Karas walked into the highest stakes poker rooms in Las Vegas. This wasn't casual gambling anymore. These were the biggest private games in the city, tables filled with players who had spent decades building reputations as the best in the world. And one by one, they sat across from Karas, and one by one, they lost. First came Stu Ungar, a 3-time World Series of Poker main event champion and widely considered one of the best poker players to ever live. Then Reese, the ultimate cash game specialist player. He was so respected that even other professionals were cautious about facing him. Then more names followed. Johnny Moss, the first ever World Series of Poker main event winner, and one of the original giants of Las Vegas poker. Puggy Pearson, a World Series of Poker champion and feared road gambler known for taking on anyone, anywhere. These weren't ordinary gamblers, they were legends of the game. But during this stretch, reputation didn't seem to matter. They started looking like amateurs. Karas didn't just win, he drained the table. According to accounts from the time, Stu Ungar alone reportedly lost more than $1 million playing against him. Reese lost even more. At the table, Karas had a reputation that made other players uneasy. He barely reacted. He didn't celebrate wins. He didn't panic during losses. Money didn't seem to mean much to him. And in a room where millions of dollars could move across the table in a single night, that kind of detachment made him extremely dangerous. Because if a player isn't afraid of losing, they're almost impossible to pressure. He didn't beat the system with technology or some hidden trick. He beat people. He understood exactly how ego works and used it against them. He'd even loan opponents money in the middle of a game, knowing pride would keep them playing and that the money would eventually find its way back to him. It wasn't just gambling anymore, it was psychological manipulation bordering on predatory. Within months, Karas's bankroll climbed past $17 million, a run so dominant that even seasoned professionals started stepping away from the table. But for Karas, something strange began to happen. Poker, the game that built his fortune, was starting to feel a little slow. And when someone is already sitting on $17 million, buying luxury cars, living large, and treating money like it was endlessly replaceable can very soon turn into boredom. And it can become a very expensive problem. And Karas had no plan on slowing down. Poker requires skill, and by the time Archie Karas had built his fortune at the poker tables, he apparently decided skill was no longer exciting enough. So he moved to the dice tables, specifically craps, a game which required nerves, and this is where the story stops sounding impressive and starts sounding completely absurd. Karas wasn't making careful bets, but was wagering hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single roll. One throw of the dice could mean gaining or losing millions within seconds, and somehow, for a while, the dice kept falling his way. At one point, Karas reportedly held every $5,000 chip inside the Binion's Horseshoe Casino. The man who had once arrived with $50 was now walking around Las Vegas carrying millions in cash, sometimes keeping it in his car. And because Vegas is still Vegas, he also carried a gun. At the peak of his streak, Karas's bankroll climbed to over $40 million. All of it was built in roughly 2.5 years. From $50 to $40 million. The gambling world eventually gave this stretch a name: The Run. Still widely considered the most extraordinary gambling streak ever recorded. But extreme streaks have one unavoidable rule. Eventually, they end. But ironically for Karas, his career began rolling downhill along with the dice that started rolling across the table. At craps, where Karas had once won millions, the numbers suddenly turned against him. Roll after roll, the chips began moving the other direction. By the time he stepped away from the table, $11 million was gone. But walking away wasn't really his style, so he went looking for another table. This time, it was baccarat, a game even more brutal in its simplicity. Within a short stretch of play, the losses continued. Another massive chunk of the fortune disappeared, and when the cards stopped falling his way, he went back to poker. The same game where he had defeated legends, but this time the momentum had shifted. Within weeks, the empire built during the run was collapsing piece by piece. Millions turning into thousands, thousands turning into almost nothing. By the end of it, nearly $30 million had vanished, and still, Karas, who once became a king, kept playing and was slowly turning into a fool. For him, stopping was never really part of the equation. But what made the story stranger was what happened next. It became a cycle. Somehow, Karas could rebuild from almost nothing, turning a few $100s into a fortune again, and then losing it again and again. It wasn't simply bad luck, and it wasn't poor strategy. It was something else entirely. For Archie Karas, the money had never really been the objective. The game was. The strange part about Archie Karas was that he was incredibly good at winning money, but keeping it was a completely different skill. Because Karas didn't really treat money the way most people do. Unlike others, it wasn't his finish line. For Karas, money was just the ticket to the next bet. Win $1 million? Great. That simply meant he could bet bigger now. Lose $1 million? Also fine for him. That just meant the game had become more interesting. When other players were sweating over a single hand, Karas was calmly pushing mountains of chips forward like he's ordering coffee. Karas seemed to fit the description of someone with gambling disorder almost perfectly. As the name clearly suggests, gambling disorder is a psychological condition where a person struggles to control the urge of gambling even after financial losses, emotional or personal damage. For Archie, the addiction was not for the huge pile of money, it was for the game itself. For years, the legend of Archie Karas kept circulating through casino floors and gambling circles like a modern folktale. The man who turned almost nothing into tens of millions. But the final chapter of that story wasn't quite as glamorous. Years later, Karas found himself back at the tables, this time playing blackjack. Only this time, the edge wasn't coming from nerves of steel or perfect reads. He was caught marking cards. Not a misunderstanding or a lucky guess. Cheating. Casino surveillance spotted it. He was caught marking cards during the blackjack game, allegedly bending or subtly scratching certain cards so they could be identified later from the back. Immediately, authorities stepped in and Karas was arrested. He was eventually banned from every major casino on the Strip. Caesars, Bidion's, the Mirage, all of them. Which is a strange ending for someone who once ruled those same casino floors. Then, for years, gambling circles calculated rumors that he wasn't just beating the games, he was manipulating them. Stories spread about unusually consistent dice rolls, with some players speculating that he had mastered techniques known as controlled shooting or dice influence. None of those claims were ever proven, but the rumors followed him throughout his career. Las Vegas remembers winners, but it loves stories like this so much more. Because in the end, Archie Karas didn't really beat the casino. For a while, it looked like he did, but he should have known one thing. The house always wins. The truth is, he became exactly the kind of player the casino was built for. Someone willing to push everything into the middle of the table again and again. And then, in 2024, the story finally closed. Archie Karas died at the age of 73. What he left behind wasn't just a gambling record, it was a paradox. A man who proved it was possible to win more money than almost anyone in gambling history. Some people still see Karas as a genius. Others see him as the ultimate cautionary tale. But the truth probably sits somewhere in between.